O'Neill.
I'm Jamie. I am also at Anderson Kill. I am ashamed to be the firm's resident AI expert.
Nailed it.
I have a bit of experience at developing machine learning algorithms in college, and when I started working at Anderson Kill, I thought it would be an interesting topic to broach as to the impact that artificial intelligence was having on the law and on litigation, and about the future of legal practice. So I'm excited to be here to talk today, and we also have with us...
Hi everybody, Neil Valsankar. I'm from IMA Financial Group. We're a top 20 insurance broker here in the U.S. I work with CFOs and asset managers and legal counsel to craft insurance programs. Before joining IMA, I was the general counsel and head of claims at York International, a regional insurance broker here in New York. And prior to that, I was a partner at a regional law firm practicing insurance coverage litigation. So, as I told my colleagues before, I like to call myself a recovering lawyer, not a broker.
Yeah, we've got recovery lawyers and a recovering lawyer
Exactly.
On the panel today. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a little bit about what biometrics and what AI are. Like I said in the intro, they're both technologies that we use very consistently throughout our everyday lives, and it's something that we don't really think about as you're using it. I mean, it's gotten to the point where both technologies are so ubiquitous. We think of, particularly from the AI point of view, you think of now the big product out there is generative AI, but there's multitudes of different forms and aspects of AI that we use on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to go through that. We're going to talk about now the emergence of the two technologies joining together and being used in tandem, which creates a whole new bevy of risks for people to worry about. There are benefits and there are reasons why these technologies working together make so much sense, but it opens up a whole new Pandora's box of risks that policyholders need to be aware of when they're designing their insurance programs, when they're designing the way that they use these technologies on a day-to-day basis. So we'll get into that. We're going to talk about some real-life use cases for both of these technologies and how that, again, informs the type of coverage that policyholders need to go out through their broker, through their insurance companies when they go to market to figure out exactly what we need to do to make sure that risks aren't falling through the cracks, that we've got these new technologies which are moving probably faster than people can keep up with. We're going to incorporate them into our business, into our day-to-day operations. How do we make sure that on the back end, when something goes wrong with these new technologies, that we've got insurance coverage for that through our insurance program, whatever that may be. And we're going to talk about more so the drawbacks and the problems, the dangers that individuals and corporations can encounter when they're using these technologies more so than the benefits. I think we all understand the benefits are streamlining operations, making your company, your organization more profitable. Those are obvious. The drawbacks associated with that and the risk-reward calculus that has to go into deciding how, when, where to use these technologies together. So as I've mentioned a couple of times now, biometrics, we use them every day throughout our day. It depends on sort of where you are, whether there's a set fit definition of what constitutes a biometric, but a biometric identifier, biometric information. Generally what you're talking about, though, is unique biological or personality type identifiers that are unique to an individual. Your fingerprint, retina scan, when you unlock your iPhone. I do it, I'm not unlocking my iPhone with my face and saying, boom, biometrics, using biometrics right now. It's just something you don't think about when you unlock your laptop with your fingerprint. If you wear an Apple Watch, it's recording all day. It's recording your heartbeat. It's recording the number of steps you take, your gait, how you walk. There's constantly feeding this information to who? Apple, someone at IBM, whoever your internet service provider is. So there are risks associated with providing that information. We're going to talk about some of those a little bit down the road. But that's what it's used for. It's used to identify an individual with information that's unique to that individual. It's not something, if you've got someone's, back when iPhones used to use and they still do, but less so now, a 4-digit PIN code to log in. That's not something that's unique to you. It's something unique because you thought of it, but it's not unique and inherent in your biological makeup. Your face scan is, your thumbprint is. And Jamie's about to talk about now the convergence. How are we using, as AI, and particularly generative AI, has become a more prominent and more ubiquitous technology. How are these two technologies working together to enhance, create additional problems? There are benefits and there are drawbacks. But before we get to that, Jamie, a little bit of background on artificial intelligence itself.
Sure. I won't go into too much detail because I'm sure everyone here has seen a presentation or has used AI in their day-to-day lives, so I'll give a relevant brief overview. Artificial intelligence, as a general category, refers to computer systems that can mimic human intelligence. Basically, they recognize patterns from data in order to make decisions. There's different types of AI, there's different subsets. The little graphic on your screen kind of shows my understanding of the different subsets of AI. Only one of which is generative AI, which is what everyone, I won't say everyone, but most people are using today in their day-to-day lives, whether that be ChatGPT or any of their competitors. AI that is able to generate results based off of information that it has already seen by analyzing patterns in order to come to conclusions. You might have heard something about agentic AI, which is very much an up-and-coming technology. You'll see it advertised to you very often in order to help you streamline tasks. It's basically an AI that can do human tasks for you. It can go book your travel plans. It can make Excel spreadsheets, all on its own autonomously. That's not really what we're going to talk about today, but just wanted to point it out in case people have questions.
And one thing too, we look at things as lawyers and as insurance recovery lawyers. We often have to come in after there's been a problem. So, Neil, from your point of view, clients coming to you and saying, "Look, this is what I'm using. These are the technologies I'm using. I need to go out and I need to go to market and I need an insurance program that's going to account for all these risks." What sort of like concerns are your clients coming to you with and saying, "Hey, this is what we're using. What do we get? And these are the problems that we foresee before anything even occurs."
Yeah, so obviously we're seeing all of our clients in every industry vertical using AI robustly for different reasons. We could have a law firm come to us and say we're using it to prepare templates, right? We have another client could come to us and say they're a software company and they're using it to drive analytics. We might have a healthcare company come to us and say we're using AI and biometrics to diagnose or provide symptom analysis. So for us as a broker, it's our job to be completely diligent and ask good questions and find out exactly how our clients are using the technology, how they're implementing the technology, and then look for an explicit grant of coverage to cauterize that risk. And typically where we're seeing it right now is two policies. We'll see it in a tech E&O policy where the definition of technology services could include some relation to AI, and then we're also seeing it in a cyber policy where you might get an endorsement for an AI, security event. There are also other policies out there right now that are silent on it. So, I'm sure my colleagues here would agree, right? To the extent something is silent and it's not excluded, you might find coverage there under an EPL policy or general liability policy. But obviously, our preference as a broker is to understand the business and then make sure that we're going out and getting you an explicit grant of coverage.
I'd say you should find coverage on your own, but that's
fair enough.
Yeah.
Back to talking about how it interacts with biometrics. There's obviously a caveat to all this, is that AI is not magic and there's going to be issues using it. Where those issues are going to be, it's going to be up to the company deploying it. It's going to be the company creating it. It's going to be the users finding out flaws in the system before it can negatively impact somebody. AI doesn't think, it calculates, and I think that that's a really important way of thinking about it. Trusting an AI to do your work comes with risks, and that's something you need to be aware of. It can help you, it might know how to do calculus better than you, but sometimes it will come to conclusions that don't match your business, your opinions, and your beliefs. How does it matter to biometrics? Businesses have begun to employ AI, biometric systems that are powered by AI, in the form of mostly behavioral prediction tools. And I'll give you an example here. Employers can deploy monitoring tools that log keystrokes. Keystrokes are an example of biometrics. In the past, it was much harder to monitor every single employee in your company and how productive they were working. That has become much, much easier with the deployment of AI programs in businesses. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but biometrics has gone from something that's useful in your day-to-day lives, like putting your fingerprint on your phone, to something that is a much broader category of advanced measurements that can keep track of virtually any part of your life, from how fast you walk to your body temperature. It's the full gambit of things that you can imagine are your own biological traits. And AI has kind of enabled that leap very quickly by processing extremely large data sets that normal human beings would not be able to process. It also improves biometrics by improving itself over time, because as many of you know, AI will learn over time from its past mistakes based off of training, and so biometrics will become more and more accurate. Of course, there's the risk that a biometric system-powered AI can become biased over time, but based off of certain factors, which we will also discuss later.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned keystrokes because, as I said earlier, we're using and providing biometrics throughout the day in so many different ways we don't even think about, and that's keystrokes and how you type and the way that the rhythm of your typing is not something that I would ever think of. I don't think it's a natural thought to say that is part of, collecting that, could be collecting my biometric information. And when you look at some of the statutes and the regulations and the laws that govern the collection of biometric material, if you're an organization that is collecting biometric material and you don't have an eye towards the statutory framework of what you're allowed to do and how you're allowed to do it, you could be walking right into a trap, and then that could walk you right into an insurance coverage trap. So we're going to talk about some of those, in particular, the Illinois law, BIPA, which was the keynote law for collecting and regulating the collection of biometric information. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, it's a lot of things that you don't even think of, because it's certainly the way that you type is not it's not a biological function. It's not something that you would think could be measured and fall within the definition of biometrics. Before these two technologies came together, just the nature of biometrics itself and the collection of biometric data, there have been some fits and starts. This first one is one of my favorite stats. This was I think it was a Champions League final game in Cardiff, and they were testing out the Welsh, I guess the Welsh equivalent of the FBI was testing out their new facial recognition technology, and it was about 170,000 people at the game. They got 2,400 hits on from their database of facial recognition, former criminals, and of those 2,400 hits, like almost 2,300 were false positives, which is, you're talking about law enforcement. If you have a 92% success rate on something like this, you should be like, oh wow, maybe back to the drawing board. A 92% failure rate is pretty abysmal from when you're talking about looking for potential criminals and taking away someone's liberty. Now, this was just a test case. They were very clear, the Welsh police, the Welsh FBI were very clear that nothing came of this. We didn't arrest it. There were false arrests. I guess no harm, no foul on that one. But to think of if they had been using that and taking people into custody, and 2,300 of the 2,400 had never done anything wrong in their life to wind up in this database, you can see the potential for harm there. This Pinellas, Florida case, so this is from way further back in 2001. This was something that you think of stuff like this and organizations, particularly police departments, law enforcement agencies, using technology like this to try and determine, try to figure out if someone is a former criminal or former criminal, a potential criminal. You've got all sorts of civil liberties potential for danger there. And this is something the ACLU jumped all over in 2001 when Pinellas, Florida started using this technology, and it was grainy images, and it was a terrible system, and it was sort of the same thing as what happened at the Champions League game almost 2 decades later. You get all these false positives. There's inherent bias, which Jamie's going to talk about a little bit when she talks about predictive policing. There are racial biases that are not necessarily intentionally written into these programs, but it's documented that there is a racial bias for using these for predictive policing. There's gender bias. It works better for white males than it does for any other group. The lowest success rate is for women of color in using this technology, just based on facial recognition. And as you can see in the example of Mr. Williams, who was arrested for shoplifting, I believe, under this same technology. This is sort of a dog chasing its tail here. They had a video, a very grainy video of Mr. Williams, which the Detroit police used to arrest him. They went back, and the witness that they had only looked at this grainy video, and he said, "Oh yes, that looks like this man here who you put into this photo array." He was arrested, spent some time in jail, and was later exonerated. As it turned out, the actual suspect was about 5'7", about 135 pounds, and Mr. Williams was about 6 foot, 200 pounds. So you can see, and then that down the road it brings up all sorts of concerns of discrimination and bias and what you're using this for. And we're talking about taking away people's liberty when you're talking about predictive policing. The same thing with this Oregon attorney, Brandon Mayfield, who was arrested for train bombings in Madrid back in 2004. The FBI actually arrested him based on a fingerprint and was held in custody. He was there for about 2 weeks until the Spanish police said, "What are you doing? We've got the actual guy who did this. Why are you holding this attorney from Oregon in custody?" The same thing with Mr. Sutton, who was arrested for rape based on a DNA sample, which saw all sorts of other concerns with this, because the expert who testified in this case said this is a completely unique set of DNA. It's 1 in 700,000. One person in 700,000 would have this, and as it turned out, it was 1 in 16 black men contained this particular DNA trait he was in jail for, I believe, 4.5 years. So, looking down the line when you're talking about, as we get into the coverage aspect of this a little bit, talking about potential privacy concerns, privacy claims, you're talking about executive liability, you're talking about potential, municipality, type claims. So there's all sorts of things as these technologies, and some of these aren't even that long ago. The Champions League game was 2018. So, and then you add AI into the mix, and you're collecting people's biometric information. In many cases without their knowledge or their consent, and then you're throwing AI into the mix, and you've got now a whole post-AI new set of concerns that you need to worry about, which Jamie's going to talk about.
Yes, we do, and I will talk about the good, and then I will talk about the scary. So, how does biometrics powered by AI improve? Systems can now learn patterns through faces, voices, fingerprints, behaviors. Feedback improves those systems over time. No longer do we really care about grainy images, bad lighting, or obstructions. AI can fill all the blanks. Voice biometrics, most biometrics now work in real time, even with background noise. Behavioral biometrics like typing, gait, and swipe patterns are now feasibly used, while in the past it would be impossible to monitor all those things at once. Iris and fingerprint matching has also improved rates because of AI implementation. And how have companies and police departments utilized those advancements in technology? The first example I'm going to give you is a real private company called Motive. Motive provides a service that when an individual fills out an insurance policy application, Motive runs a real-time machine learning algorithm on tens of thousands of digital behavior marks, or so they say, to instantly, I'm quoting them, to instantly and accurately predict the intent of an individual. The time spent typing, the amount of hesitation the person has, their typing speed, their mouse movements, and their keystrokes are just some of the factors which Motive says can show the riskiness of an applicant. Of course, that is quite dystopian to many of you, that you could be denied insurance based off you typing a little too quickly. But that is something that this company is able to do for insurance companies and for different contract-based entities because of AI-powered biometrics. Another one, Veriato, provides bossware. So there's a bunch of different companies that you might have heard provide for bossware. Basically, software algorithms, AI-based algorithms that run on an employee's computer while they are working, can track everything based off of where their mouse is moving, how long they spend on each screen in order to determine, from whether they're being productive and they should keep their job to whether they are stealing company secrets, which is, I believe, where Veriato has more of a market where they want to tell when an employee, whether it's a new hire, could possibly be accessing information they should not be accessing. Another example, Flock Safety. Basically, they put surveillance cameras in suburban neighborhoods to watch for traffic patterns and people's movements, and then matches people and cars to people and cars in their database to see how dangerous the neighborhood is and whether they should alert neighbors. All of those things are only now able to be implemented because of AI and the widespread nature of AI.
So yeah, that would lead me to be curious, Neil. Then, if you've got a client who comes to you and they say, "We're using, X technology with biometrics, with Y AI technology," we obviously want all of our risks to be covered. We want to be as comprehensive as we can, but we don't want the money that we pay to our insurance program to skyrocket. How do you, as the intermediary between the policyholder and the insurance company, what's your advice to them? How do you generally advise people in terms of these emerging technologies? This is how we're using it. What's the advice to disclose to the insurance company?
Sure. So obviously, I think the most important thing you can do is have a robust risk management program in place, and so that could be contractual controls, right? Making sure that liabilities and potential negligence are delineated in contracts with your vendors or any other third parties. Doing a constant risk assessment, so you're auditing your system to make sure that it's not that it's acting appropriately. You could also, for example, do make sure that you have a robust incident response plan in place. So you want to make sure that your policies and your procedures adequately respond to any event that might occur.
Good advice.
And so I went from the good to the scary to the scarier.
Scariest.
Scary. Well, we don't know what's the scariest
I guess we don't know what's
right
the scariest
now.
yet.
Terminator could come at any moment.
We can still top ourselves.
Yeah, there's time for this. Predictive policing, I'm sure that this is not a new concept. Basically using algorithms or biometrics to predict where a crime might occur, who is likely committed, and when police should intervene in a certain incident. How predictive policing or crime prediction works currently from the systems that I'm aware of and I've seen is that it will take historical crime data, it will aggregate it, and it will basically do like what's on the screen, which is a heat map of, I believe it's Manhattan, in order to determine, yeah, that is Manhattan.
I'm not going to contradict you. Let's just take a look.
Fine. We might be the red spot. I think that might be Times Square that is the red spot. And then Central Park is pretty safe, I guess. It basically will say, okay, well, there's a high concentration of people in Times Square usually. That means there's more crime, so we should probably put more police in Times Square. That can become a problem when you have a low-income neighborhood in Detroit that has certain blocks being specifically targeted by police, where police are waiting on every street corner in order to stop people from committing crimes that they may or may not have committed at all. And so that's where there is a huge risk of bias. Because it's using historical data to predict crime, if that historical data is biased towards certain marginalized groups, it will continue to promulgate the same biases. AI generally can't detect those biases because it was trained on them. It thinks that they're right. It's what it was trained to do, because AI is not magic. It is thinking based on the data it has been provided. Obviously, you can try to program out biases, but if you don't know they exist in the first place, it can become very difficult. With policing, it's pretty common knowledge that police might be biased from time to time. When it comes to a program that could, per se, be biased against an older individual because they think that's applying to get a job, because older individuals tend to leave the company faster, or they tend to not be as productive, let's say, and the company fires them, basically that AI just committed discrimination in violation of the Age Discrimination Act. So it's a little bit subtler in those contexts, but it's still very, very much present among whether it be criminal or civil uses of biometrics powered by AI.
It's like Minority Report as a documentary.
Oh, yeah.
So on the privacy end of things, we've got some cases up here which are pretty recent, 2024, 2025. But I think to take a step back and just see like how we got to this point and how case law and statutory interpretation has developed through the years. To take a step back, I mentioned BIPA before, and BIPA from a biometric privacy standpoint was the seminal law, and it's every state that either has developed or is in the process of developing biometric privacy laws in the United States as either in large part or entirely based it off of Illinois' Biometric Information Privacy Act. So that was passed in the late 2000s, 2007, 2008. And a couple of key things to know about BIPA are everything needs to be in writing. If you're an organization who's going to be collecting biometric data from either your employees or your end users or your customers, you need to let them know in writing that you're collecting it. You need to get their consent in writing, and you need to let them know in writing what you're going to do with it. And there was some confusion early on as to what exactly that meant. There was a case against Six Flags. It was a teenage kid who went to Six Flags one day over the summer. Six Flags said, hey, if you only give us your fingerprints, we'll give you a discount on a season-long pass. The kid said, that sounds great. Of course, all I got to do is give you my fingerprints. So he gives Six Flags his fingerprints. They didn't get anything in writing from him. He goes back. He tells his mom, what a great, all this. Like, I saved us some money. I'm going to be there all the time. All I had to do was give them my fingerprints. And she goes nuts. They sue Six Flags. And Six Flags' defense in the case was, well, nothing happened. No, we didn't do, no, there was no damage. We didn't lose it. We didn't sell it. We weren't hacked. We still got them. We'll get rid of them. End of story. And the court said, no, that's not how. It's not how BIP is written, because there are minimum statutory damages under BIPA, regardless of what happens with this data. And two, we're not talking about, collecting someone's credit card and losing it. You can call American Express and get a new credit card, and end of story. You're talking about someone's fingerprints. But forget about the whole fact that he was 15 years old and probably couldn't have consented to that anyway. But no, you're talking about someone's very extremely, as far down the spectrum as you can get, difficult information to change. It's not impossible to change your biometric information, but it is something that no one wants to go through. So the court said no. So that's sort of framed the discussion around collecting biometric information from there on out. From a coverage point of view, there was an early case involving a tanning salon that was collecting people's fingerprints. For what? I don't know. Can't imagine why that would help the tanning salon to collect someone's information. But what they did was they gave it to a third party to categorize it, catalog it, and keep it. They got sued by their end users for, again, under BIPA. The tanning salon went to its insurance company and said, we've got a claim here for a privacy violation under our coverage B of our GL. Defend us in this case. And the insurance company said, no, this is not. You gave it to one person. And it goes back to what's advertising, what's publication. And the court said, same thing we've said before. You give it to one person, that's publication. We're going by the meaning of publication here, and that's just giving it to one person. So they got coverage under their GL for that. In more recent years, there was a case a couple of years ago against White Castle where White Castle was collecting fingerprints from its employees to go and log in and log out every day. They were doing it in violation of BIPA. They hadn't met one of the written standards of consent that they had to under BIPA. They got sued by their employees in a class action. The employees were saying every single time, because as I mentioned, there are minimum statutory damages under BIPA, every single time we logged in, every morning, every night, we log in, we log out, that's a violation of BIPA. And White Castle said, no, that can't. It's the same information every time. It's the same fingerprint every time. That's only one violation per employee. And the Illinois Supreme Court said, no, that's not the case. Every single time someone clocks into work, clocks out of work, that you collect their information, that is a violation of BIPA. So White Castle threw themselves on the mercy of the court. They said, listen, if this goes through and we lose this case, that we're talking about potentially an $18 billion loss. And the court said, well, listen, that's really too bad, and we really feel sorry for you, but that's not the way the statute is written. If you want to change it, go to the Illinois legislature. And it actually was changed last summer. Governor Pritzker signed into law a clarification that the legislature came up with. But that sort of frames how these privacy violations, privacy rights have worked either through BIPA itself or then on the back end of coverage. This Dialer HireView case, the company was using an algorithm to assess people's qualifications for a job based on their facial scan and the way that they spoke, which, aside from the sort of fundamental issues with that, but they were doing it without the consent of the job applicants. Same thing that we ran into with the Six Flags case. If you don't have the consent of the person that you're collecting this information from, you're in violation of BIPA, and that in and of itself opens you up to damages. Same type of thing in the Clearview case. They were collecting biometric data from their end users from photographs that were posted online. Harkens back to a very early case against Facebook, which settled for about $500 million, where Facebook, all they were doing was using face scans to suggest tags. You can tag someone in a photo on Facebook, suggesting people to tag without their consent. and they settled that for about $500 million. So, same thing with these other two cases. FTC, that was Section 5 of the FTC Act, which I looked up, and it is unfair, deceptive employment acts and practices. So they were collecting data from their employees without consent. So it's all the same. It's consent, written consent in almost all cases that you need to get from individuals that you're collecting this information from. And if you're not, it doesn't matter what happens on the back end. It doesn't matter in most cases whether you lose the data, whether you sell the data, whether you're hacked and someone steals the data. You are opening yourself up. If you're under HIPAA or under a similar statute in a different jurisdiction, you're opening yourself up to statutory damages at a minimum. And then you've got, on the back end, potential coverage fight with your insurance tower, because depending on what the facts of the loss are, who you turn to get coverage from.
The other main area where we've seen a lot of litigation thus far is in the discrimination arena. So discrimination laws still apply even if it's an AI that's doing the discriminating, whether it be Title VII, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination Act, Fair Housing Act, all still apply. I'm going to go through briefly a couple of the cases that have gone pretty far in litigation with some interesting updates that all utilize AI-powered biometrics. In Wells Fargo, I'm sure some of you have heard, plaintiffs alleged that Wells Fargo was discriminating against non-white applicants for mortgages. They allege higher denial rates, worse terms, slower processing. They had to talk to agents more often than white applicants in violation of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Fair Housing Act, Sections 1981 and 1982 of the Civil Rights Act, and a bunch of different California state statutes. Class certification was actually denied in that case a couple weeks ago, although they said that each individual suit could go on. I think that's because there was not enough commonality between the different claimants. Husky v. State Farm. Once again, black homeowners insured by State Farm allege that State Farm's claims handling process disproportionately caused black policyholders to face delays, additional paperwork, more interactions, and lesser benefits compared to similar situated white policyholders. They were able to prove that and survive a motion to dismiss based off of publicly available data. In comparison to Wells Fargo, Mobley versus Workday, plaintiff, a black male over the age of 40 with a disability, alleged that his hundreds of job applications that he had submitted via the AI software disadvantaged him on the basis of his race, age, and disability. Class certification was actually granted last week. So it's going to depend specifically on what plaintiffs can prove and what the facts of the case are, but there's a variety of statutes that plaintiffs, I just named a few, there's a variety of statutes that plaintiffs have been bringing, whether it be under federal law or under state law.
Neil, so if you're either before the fact or after the fact, if you're going to be, if you're one of your clients using these technologies, where are you looking for coverage proactively? Like, what do we need to have in place in our program, in our various towers, to make sure that we're covered for this? And then after the fact, when a loss happens, where are you directing them, I guess, to you use this biometric technology, you're using it in tandem with AI. We got sued. Neil, where do we go?
So, great question, right? So obviously, as I mentioned before, we're looking explicitly for a coverage grant. So that's in your policy, that's in your tech E&O policy, that's in your cyber policy. Depending on the facts and circumstances giving rise to the claim, we'll look at every other policy in the suite of your portfolio policies. So as you had mentioned, it could be an EPL policy, it could be a D&O or E&O policy, it could be the GL policy. But we're essentially taking the four corners of whatever came in with respect to that claim or that letter of representation, and we're matching it up against the policy wordings, and we're making sure that there's coverage somewhere for it, and we're submitting it to the insurance carrier for an opinion.